All right. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for watching on the Osceola's YouTube channel. This is Seminole Sidelines. Jerry Kutz, Osceola publisher, joining me. I'm Bob Ferrante, the Osceola's editor. We're going to do similar to last Wednesday, a little bit of a break from the football discussion because Ross Dellinger has gifted us quite the discussion topic mid-football season. It's not a realignment story. This is not full on the Pac-12 is trying to make a comeback, but this is a really interesting revenue structure proposal that has been clearly close enough to being floated for somebody to leak it to Ross Dellinger and for him to put it out on Yahoo Sports Tuesday night. Again, Yahoo is a partner of Rivals. The Osceola part of that Rivals network, so we appreciate Ross's dogged reporting as we've enjoyed digging into these business of college athletics stories. Jerry, I'm not sure I expected this kind of story to happen mid-September, but this feels like an interesting proposal. I've called it an olive branch without knowing how strong of an olive branch it is between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson. Before we kind of dig into the bullet points, your initial thoughts, I guess, as you read this story from Ross.
Well, my first thought is mediation is working. You know, the threat of a lawsuit has got people's attention. And, there's two types of mediation. One is what goes on that's driven by the courts. And, and John Cooper has, encouraged that, as he always does. But the other type of mediation is ongoing. And, Michael Alford had told me that there's hardly a day that passes that he and Jim Phillips don't speak, and oftentimes about, matters pertaining to how to solve this problem. And as Alford has said since day one and repeatedly, this isn't a question of relationships, it's a question of math. So, Alford has never said our goal is to get out of the ACC. What he said is our goal is to, find a way to be able to compete with the Big Ten and the SEC, who are going to generate, the number I've always heard is 40 million or more a year than any other conference. It was interesting to me, as I noted to you, Bob, when I read Dellinger used the number 30 million or more. And I haven't seen that number. So I don't know what that means. And that's a good conversation for us to have with Dellinger or text to him. I don't think it was a typo. That isn't, something I've seen from him. So, hats off to him. He's doing a great job of reporting. He's got a good source for sure.
Yeah, this is a complex story, and I'll be straight with you. I read it once last night, edited it, got it on the site. It's been a good discussion topic on the Osceola Village. Went ahead and read it again, trying to make sure I've retained a lot of the interesting talking points. Still pretty complex. I still have my healthy skepticism here.
Oh yeah,
but
and listen, Dellinger, I mean, he repeated himself 3 or 4 times, saying that this is, very preliminary, and it's going to be difficult to get, the kittens herded together and to get a 2/3 vote. So, we may be a ways before this is, more formulated. But, it's encouraging. It's encouraging to see that the presidents are having meetings and talking about it.
I agree.
I mean, that's what the purpose of the lawsuit was. I mean, FSU was getting nowhere before bringing the lawsuit. And 10 short months later, they're having meetings. I think that speaks productively.
And I think Florida State and Clemson have been proactive. Again, Florida State and Clemson can't be in a collusion sense as far as the lawsuit. There are separate lawsuits in separate states. I'm not going there particularly. But the
No.
reason why these success initiatives, that hot word that came about, let's say 18 months ago or so in Amelia Island, success initiatives are here because Florida State and Clemson talked through what are some options, what's a partial bridge, what's a small solution to get to a number. And I think Michael Alford, Florida State's athletic director, Graham Neff, Clemson's athletic director, talk a lot, and they have put together what are some ideas. Let's put our heads together. Let's brainstorm possibilities. I think Success Initiatives was a massive step. It was announced in May of 2023. We didn't really know much about it until, honestly, some reporting by the Associated Press maybe a couple weeks ago as far as what it really looked like. So I just want to tell people these things develop very, very slowly, gradually with these meetings where it's tough to get presidents and chancellors either together in a room in Charlotte or on a Zoom or on a phone call. But to me, Jerry, this is similar, again, similar to the success initiatives. Do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And what, Michael Alford said in that interview that we did with him, it took 18 months to get the presidents for Jim Phillips, the commissioner, to get enough of the presidents to agree on this success initiative. 18 months it took. So maybe it's easier the second time around with this initiative, but it's no small feat to get 18 people at your church, a committee meeting to agree, or your neighborhood homeowners association meeting to agree. We've all been there and done that. It's so, yeah, but I think in my opinion, if you concede to one, you might be more inclined to concede to a second. And so, I mean, some people may dig their heels in and say, well, listen, we've already conceded to one, that's all. But I don't know. It's a shot. And I think if the teams want to keep the league together, that they'd be inclined to do this.
It takes progressive thinking, and I think there's a lot of progressive thinkers in college athletics. Whether you're an AD or an administrator, presidents and chancellors have to get kind of wrap their head around what this can mean short term, what this can mean long term. I think I saw on Twitter, the story broke Tuesday night. There was a lot of commentary from folks in Big 12 country saying, we've seen this movie before with Texas. This
Right.
did work in the short term for Texas until the Longhorns saw that grant of rights with the conference going down. I think it was 2 years. And then they said, hey, that's great. We're jumping in the SEC. This is a different grant of rights. It's a different structure with what we're looking at with the ACC. I think I'm curious, Terry, when we look at this massive revenue gap too, it could be, as you said, 30 million, 40 million. I believe the ACC structure is locked in at a 4 or 4.5% escalator annually. So that's not a lot. That's okay when you look back at when and where it was signed, but comparable to the current market, comparable to these newer contracts, SEC and Big Ten, it's only going to escalate out of control. Is it feasible? Can you imagine a Wake Forest athletic director, a Syracuse athletic director, a chancellor at a school in a lesser position saying, we need to do this, we need to be progressive? And how do you sell it?
Yeah. I think you have to look back at history. And I think Stanford and Cal can remind people, if you look at the Pac-12, at one time they had an uneven revenue structure with USC and UCLA made more money than the rest of the conference made. And when they entered into it was Pac-10, I think, at that time. And then when they went into the new contract, that got deleted out, that it would be an even revenue share. And USC went on record, I've read, that immediately, that as soon as that contract was over, they were out. And to the word, they were. And, I don't know where Cal stands on that. They've sued UCLA to, and are receiving revenue from that, UCLA's departure. But they may have a memory of that says we would have been better, taking an uneven distribution, less than USC and UCLA. In the long haul, we would have been better to have taken the smaller distribution and kept the conference together.
Right.
So depending on how those two schools feel, they could swing the vote one way or the other. Bob, I think we ought to stop a second and back up and let our readers know what all is in that proposal. There's a couple parts to it, one of which is also a negotiation of shortening the length of the grant of rights.
Right.
And that one is, I think, also of a lot of importance to our readers. And what we know about it at this point is limited, because I would imagine to shorten the length of that, it wouldn't be just a ACC decision. I would think there'd have to be some agreement from ESPN in that as well. Right.
That's the inner-pound gorilla, is we still don't know ESPN's line of thinking here in the future of the conference, right?
Yeah. So if the conference wants to keep Florida State and Clemson in the ACC and taking a few years off of that grant of rights is one way to do it. Would they be willing to do that? Understanding that they wanted the term to be long to help recover the investment they made in the ACC network, which is now generating significant money a year for each school. So, they've got a return on investment calculation, and how many years would they be willing to take off that grant of rights? So there's it's an interesting topic with a lot of question marks.
I think with a lot of these stories, we have more questions that come out than actual answers.
Yeah.
Until you actually see the fine print, the proposal of a fine print. And part of this proposal, is, I think Ross says it's two separate pot of revenue to be divided based on your media value metrics. I'll emphasize those because he used those exact words, to be divided based on media value metrics. I think I know what that means. I think that means eyeballs watching football games. Yeah. I think that means eyeballs watching Duke or North Carolina basketball games. What can that? Am I missing anything else? Like, if we were listing, what are we talking about, Jerry? What do you think?
Well, if you remember Alford's presentation to the Board of Trustees, 2 years ago now, or come January? I think it was January of 22 or January 23. He presented a chart showing that when you divide revenue equally with 14 or 15 members, Florida State gets about 7% of the media revenue. But then he put a chart up and showed that each Clemson and Florida State are generating 14% of the eyeballs. Right?
Right.
And then number 3 is down, significantly beneath what Florida State and Clemson are generating. And that was Florida State's initial proposal to the ACC, was to use some media metric. And that got shut down. And then Florida State pursued, in Clemson, a success initiative, which had legs, because that, let's face it, in terms of media brand, Florida State and Clemson have a brand established that is getting eyeballs. For Miami or North Carolina or the lesser of the ACC teams to really impact what their media, the eyeballs they get, is harder. I mean, Miami this year is going to have a lot of eyeballs. So,
right.
They'll make the case probably through as the course of this year. They're going to get a higher percentage of eyeballs this year, maybe than Florida State will, right? So success will help them in that metric. But I think that's the issue I would have if I was Boston College or Wake or one of them. Is, I mean, they are so far down in terms of the percentage of eyeballs that they're getting that it's kind of a losing hand they're dealt. There's not a lot of opportunity to make money for them on this metric. Whereas with the success initiative, there is. I mean, if they make finish in the top 25, get a bowl game, that's $5.5 million in their pocket. That's attainable, right? If they win the ACC championship, which there's been 4 or 5 teams win the ACC championship here in the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, beyond Clemson, Florida State, Pitt had their great year. Yeah, there are some opportunities aside from the Florida State and Clemson mix.
So if you were to win the AC championship, one of those teams, downline teams, in the year Pitt won the ACC championship, they would get the automatic berth, and they get an extra $4 million. So in that year, they could make $8 or $9 million on the ACC initiative, and that's within their control. You can do that. I think the eyeballs. I'd be curious to see how far you can move the needle when you're having a great year, like Miami is going to maybe have this year, if they can continue to win. How will their eyeballs move up compared to their normal year? And there's another big factor there that Andy Miller, points out to me on the regular when we're on this conversation. A lot of the reason your eyeballs, the ACC's eyeballs, are not as good as SEC numbers or Big Ten numbers is the time slots they put the ACC in. Right? Yep. I mean, if you put SEC games in the top time slots, well, they're going to get more eyeballs. Not because of who they are, but because of when they're playing. And so, again, if I'm Boston College and Syracuse, I'm going, well, heck, are you going to put me in the good time slots, or are you going to keep putting me in at noon? I mean, those are discussions.
I'm still dumbfounded. Florida State Cal is the 7 o'clock ESPN2 game. It doesn't feel like that. Like that's a good slot, for example.
Yeah.
But Florida State's not going to be in that slot if losses pile up, and the league's going to have to find good games to fill good slots.
I think maybe that is in the 7:30 slot because of Cal.
Sure.
That not just because they're 3-0, but they want that West Coast audience. And
Totally
it's
agree.
their first game in the ACC. So if you play at 7:30, that means my son will be watching it in Berkeley at 4:30, right? In his sports bar there in the Bay Area. So I think you'll start to see those kind of matchups in later time slots.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. One of the things we touched on earlier is a lot of these rules, whatever we want to call them, ACC guidelines, the success initiatives, that took a 2/3 majority vote of the presidents and chancellors at each of the schools around the league. Again, I'll emphasize Jim Phillips is a consensus builder. He tries to listen. He tries to bring people to the table. He tries to build consensus.
Right.
Here's the $30 or $40 million question. Next year, every school is going to be looking for an additional 20 to 25 million, potentially, if this House NCAA settlement comes through. It's going to be a line on your athletic department ledger. You got to figure it out. I believe in the Board of Trustees meeting, they called it a cap, although it can slightly, I believe, escalate in future years. So it's a little bit of a step type of deal. But this is a massive number that again, President, Chancellor, AD, Board of Trustees, they're trying to figure all this stuff out. Are other schools going to be willing to give up future money to potentially appease Florida State / Clemson? Or is this just, hey, we've got to do this if we're a smaller school, a Wake, a Boston College, whatnot, because that's collectively what we think is good for our future as well as the conference. It's a massive question. Jerry, I just don't, how do you get that 2/3 majority vote?
It's going to be tough with some of those schools. I mean, if you're running the athletic budget at a school that's $100 million, and you have to come up with 22.5 million more, it's a whole different conversation than if you're at a school with $200 million athletic budget. Just and what's your ability to generate revenue? Like at Florida State, we've had great success over the years generating revenue through our booster organization. It's been one of the more successful in the country. But not every school has a booster organization like that. It's going to depend on who is sitting in the president's chair. Is the president willing to lower athletic fees to help out his AD or not? And if they're not going to lower athletic fees and they're not going to, and they're going to persist at some schools in making athletics pay out of state tuition fees, the AD's hands are really tied. I remember Dave Hart telling me that of the athletic budget, when you took out all of the contractual obligations to the university, to coaches, to the conference, the AD was only in charge, had discretionary control of about 5% of the budget.
It's not much.
It's not much. And so now if you got $100 million athletic budget, you're looking at a 22%. And I'm only in control of 5. I mean, you'd be a hell no to giving Florida State more money,
Yep.
That'd be the easiest decision you make that day. And so, yeah, there's guys sitting in an AD chair that are going to have to say no. But if they were sitting in an AD chair where it was a $200 million budget, they might say yes. I mean, it's situational decision making. So, hey, let's go back to the original premise. They're having meetings about it. That's progress. This lawsuit is, we say it bears no fruit, that we're 10 months into it, but we've already gotten a success initiative out of it. And we're looking at the president's traveling with all the other things they're having to do. They're traveling to have a meeting on this topic. That tells me there's progress. They may not be happy about their travel plans, but they're doing it. And so, we'll see where it goes. But it is encouraging.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you could say leverage. The lawsuit is being used as leverage by Florida State and
100%.
Clemson to, hey, we're having a conversation because of the lawsuit. And it took a lot of money to get there, probably millions of dollars of legal fees across the board. When you look at a lot of Florida State lawyers outside of the general counsel, a lot of Clemson lawyers outside of their general counsel, a lot of flying back and forth. But it has gotten to a point where, again, where we all started. It's an olive branch. I have no clue how strong it is. I have more questions than probably answers. But the curiosity is definitely there for what could become of this.
Yes, very much. But it's when we first started this in December of 22, when Florida State and the ACC filed lawsuits against each other, every legal expert I knew said, this will never get to discovery. This will never go to trial. This is all, a leverage play to get to a settlement that you weren't able to get to without filing a lawsuit. And so, I don't know, it sure looks like those guys were right. That this is a step. And
it is a step. I think this is an interesting question and one that was kind of on my mind because it's on the mind of a lot of national writers as they're definitely taking shots at Florida State being 0-3 and through the lens of this lawsuit. Kelly Lowry, former Florida State quarterback, we thank you for watching as always and offering your thoughts. Kelly's asking, does Florida State lose leverage at 0-3? I have a short answer, but Jerry, how about your thoughts?
No, I want to hear your answer. I'm curious.
I don't think the football record, it matters a lot in the big scheme of perspective and how you are viewed as a brand. I'm not discounting that. I'm not sure 1-2 or 0-3 mean very much as far as people are sitting down at a table and discussing the potential of financially, what does this revenue restructure look like?
Yeah, I was going to say the similar thing. When the chart Alford showed the years that he was, showing, included a lot of not successful years for Florida State. If you look back the last 10 years, 13 we were great, but in between there were some lean years. And the second thing, I think Florida State is one of those brands. It has a large following of Seminoles that are very loyal to the brand. And then it has a bunch of people that usually they wear the color orange, and they're going to tune in hoping to see us get beat. The Dallas Cowboy effect. It's America's team, love them or hate them. And I think there's probably a lot of people tuning in because they want to see us get smacked. And a lot of SEC fans and our arch rivals. But I tried to look at the television numbers to see how we were doing. And I didn't. I got distracted from it. But I wonder with our losses how our numbers are.
I think the ratings for Georgia Tech game, obviously a week 0 game, is an outlier when you're looking at
Right.
ratings, but those ratings were really good. I think it was well past 4
Saw
million.
that one.
I haven't honestly looked at the last two. Who knows what Cal is going to bring to the table? The joke about SMU is that SMU is not a great ratings type of team, but Florida State's going to play there next week. I will be very curious to see what these ratings numbers look like. Jerry, we have a little bit more to discuss. We want to talk. Tennessee's going to have a talent tax. Of course, they had a board of trustees meeting last week.
Stick around for this.
Yeah, there's some interesting discussions here. We're wrapping up what we're talking about as far as this revenue structure proposal, but we got a few more business of college athletics topics to discuss on the other side of this break, so stick with us.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at BackshoreApparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10. Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we're back on the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. We're going to continue some of our business of college athletics discussions. I want to get into the board of trustees notes later on, but this one is absolutely fascinating, I think, to both of us. Tennessee announced on Tuesday, in the middle of an incredible start, what they've had beating NC State. I believe they're 3-0, and it's not even close. Tennessee looking every bit of a top 10 team, a likely college football playoff team. They next year will have a 10% talent tax for every season ticket holder to purchase. Tennessee's got a massive, rabid fan base. Never been to Neyland Stadium myself, but here it's an incredible experience. Jerry, your thoughts on Tennessee doing this 10% talent tax? Why are they doing it, and do you think that will be successful?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say, when I first heard this $22.5 million revenue sharing law was passed, or not passed, it was a settlement. It would have been far worse had the NCAA and the conferences not agreed to this settlement. You know, the Supreme Court would have ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Any antitrust case that comes before the Supreme Court, the NCAA will lose. Last time it was 9-0. So they rushed to, we better settle this, and they did. So each school is going to be about $22.5 million. Where's the money going to come from? If you think about it, Seminole Boosters is raising about that much a year that they transfer to athletics. And we're getting donor fatigue just from that alone.
Right.
So you're going to go out and raise twice as much? Unlikely. Where else do you come up with $22.5 million? Well,
Sales.
tickets. Generally you go to ticket sales. And if you can't sell more, you've got to either put in more premium seating, that you can charge more for, or you just put a tax on the seats across the board. Every time when I ran ticket priority policies, we did 3 ticket, I was in charge of it. And Andy said, the athletic board said, we got to change the ticket priority policy because we need to raise an extra $6 million. That's how you do it. And so I knew there was going to be an athletic director that was going to come out and say, well, let's just put a tax on tickets. And I think you'll find a lot of athletic departments are going to do this. So I know the fans listening to this they're grabbing their wallets as I speak. But ADs don't have a lot of choices. Like I said, Dave Hart said 5% of his budget was discretionary. You can cut your budget, which it's hard to cut $22 million out of your budget, especially when the coaches' salaries are contractual.
Exactly.
So, man, I knew this was coming. And in a way, I applaud the Tennessee athletic director for being transparent and calling it a talent tax. But I don't know how many fans are really going to appreciate that.
I was going to say, I think that's a fan calling saying, Jerry, that's a lot of money.
Oh yeah, you're going to get a phone call. I promise you. If you're buying, and in Tennessee, their tickets are a lot more expensive than in Florida State. But think about a family who has 6 tickets on the east side of Doak Campbell Stadium, and they're paying $350 a ticket. It's $2,100. So you're looking at another $210.
Right.
And then your quarterback goes out there and doesn't play a very good game. Do you get a refund on that $210? That talent tax? I think calling it a talent tax puts the players in the crosshairs of the booze. Because, the guys who are paying NIL money in and not seeing a good performance from the players they're funding through their NIL aren't happy. But there aren't many of those people in your stadium. Now what you're doing is you're putting all 100,000 of their season ticket holders have some skin in the game by calling it a talent tax. I'm not sure they've done that.
Expectations.
Huh?
It elevates the expectations.
It elevates the expectation. I like it that everybody's got some skin in the game, but you're really you've got a professionalized situation already with NIL, and I heard a number of people sitting around me in the Champions Club booing, who told me, I've never booed a player in my life, but now they're getting paid. They're not amateurs anymore. And so they feel empowered that they can boo them. And so I don't know, man. I think that's a little bit of a risky deal. I like it because it's transparent, but I'm not sure the AD shouldn't have just manned up and said, hey, I got to generate $22.5 million, and I'm coming to come to you for 10 of it. And that's what we're going to charge everybody 10% more on their season tickets. And that's going to pay half of this $20 million that a mandated federal court has put on me. I think people might swallow that pill a little easier, but I'm not sure. And I ask our listeners, please let us know, chime into this call or email us. I'd be curious. It might be a good poll for us to run on our message board.
Sure.
If the athletic director really needed this, which they do, which would you rather have? Just increase season. And by the way, not only is Tennessee increasing 10% for a talent tax, but they're also increasing their season ticket price by 4.5% as a matter of annual business. By the way, inflation is now down to 2.5%, and they got inflation of 4.5% on their tickets, even with getting an extra $40 million from ESPN. I don't know, man. It would not sit easy with me if I was a Tennessee fan. Now, let me tell you why they can do it. They have a 103,000 seat stadium, and it's been sold out for years.
Right.
They got a winning team, and they have a waiting list of 15,000 season ticket holders. So if you don't like this talent tax, there's a guy in the waiting list that will be just fine with it. And so they're in a very bull market. And you can do a lot of things when you're in a bull market that we can't do here at Florida State, where we got 1.5 million people within a 3-hour drive. We piss them off by doing a lot less than this. And we have a much softer market than they got up there in Knoxville.
Right. I mean, again, there's not as many people near Tallahassee within a 3-hour drive because a lot of it's pine trees and fish. It's just not. Yeah, it's a tough one. So I thought it was very interesting that it's an athletic director at a Power 2 school that is coming out first and doing this. I mean, honestly, if you are, let's say, a Big 12 athletic director and you're doing it, I think it's very, very understandable the why, because you've got a revenue gap by comparison to an SEC or Big 10. But I think we're dealing with a lot of the worst of the okay or bad options. It's something that a lot of ADs are discussing and trying to figure out, okay, what do you think we can actually get away with? Because the bill's going to come due here pretty soon, August of 2025.
Oh yeah,
lots of questions.
That's why he's doing it now, because you've got to print your ticket applications and put them in the mail with a February deadline to get the revenue to pay September 25.
Yeah. It's,
I mean, if Alford doesn't do it, if Alford's not thinking or doing it, which he's probably not, I'm sure he's going to do something else. But if you wanted season tickets to help bail you out, you have to make that decision today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's dive into some of these Florida State Board of Trustees notes, because a lot of it applies to athletics. And I'm kind of curious, Jerry, for some of your thoughts. I think these are kind of nuggets that readers don't want to miss, because there's a lot that comes out of these meetings. They're very long and sometimes not geared toward athletics. But a lot of the discussion, Michael Alford mentioned they've got a working group to discuss the roster limits. Again, the roster limits, that's coming out of this House NCAA case. FSU baseball could go up to 34 scholarships. That's going to be potentially for the 2026 season for all NCAA schools. So that's an interesting question of how many scholarships might Florida State go up to in baseball. Still a discussion point. They're looking at, formed a committee to evaluate that. Why is this important? Link Jarrett's going to want as many scholarships available as possible because he's recruiting against not just Eric Bakich at Clemson, but Sully at Florida and LSU and other schools. You have to have scholarship power. Gone are the days of 11.7 scholarships. Gone are the days for college softball, where I think it was neighborhood of 13 or 14 scholarships. I'm not exactly sure, but these can still be equivalency scholarships again, but these are significant decisions as far as having the recruiting power to retain some talent, having the power to attract some talent. I don't know where we're going to land in terms of the number of scholarships, but Florida State's been very proactive here. Again, Michael Alford, a college baseball player, he's running some numbers as well as with the Florida State staff. Jerry, we've talked a little bit about each scholarship could be in the neighborhood of, say, $50,000. This is a significant number. If you go from 11.7 to the neighborhood of 34, just do the math real quick. I mean, 20 scholarships is roughly $1 million, and this all depends on if you're in state or out of state, right? Different numbers, but it's another ask for the boosters, potentially for ticket holders. You've got to come up with that number. Jerry, I'm just curious, as they're looking at baseball, softball, other sports, these aren't easy to generate revenue sports, but how do you look at finding revenue here to cover these new scholarships?
Well, in our interview with Michael Alford, he indicated that if you were to go ahead and fully fund all of them, that would be take football from 85 to 105. If you're to take baseball from 11.7 to 34, and softball to, I think it's 34 or 35 in softball. If you were to do that, bring them all the way up to the maximum, it would increase your athletic budget, scholarship budget, by about $5 million a year, on top of the other stuff. So, a total impact on your budget because of the House settlement of $30 million a year. So it's a lot. And how do you go about it? You got to look at everything. Like I wrote once a while back, you got to beg, borrow, and steal. You got to beg from your donors and ask them, if you care about baseball, we want to increase scholarships by $1 million a year. Would you be willing to donate to help us do that? Would you be willing to pay more for your season tickets, either through a tax, a scholarship tax, or through maybe a higher, a priority policy change? So you look at those things. What can we cut out of our baseball budget? So it's beg. You can borrow money to do this in the short term, and you can steal money from the budgets. So you either cut your baseball budget, or you look across the athletic department and find where you can steal money out of those budgets. Cut unnecessary spending. And do you have any waste in your department that you can cut? And I think what you're going to see is people will lose jobs. There'll be things that the athletic department will cut out. They're not going to need people to do it anymore. I remember there were budget cuts made while I was there where they cut the maintenance budget. We used to have a reserve fund for facilities. And during one athletic administration, within about 3 years, there was no reserve fund left. because they were, I used the word steal. They weren't stealing. I mean, there's no crime here, but, they would take money out of that budget, rob from Peter to pay Paul, and maintain a balanced athletic budget. So, Bob, that's what they're going to have to do. And as you and I were talking to Alford, we asked the question, does this mean you'll renegotiate coaches' salaries? And he reminded us, well, they're contractual to begin with. And then the second thing he said was, yes, everything's on the table, and that coaches want to win. And a good coach who's a good partner with the athletic director is going to be willing to negotiate to get to what he believes the number he needs to win. And that might be maybe not taking a trip, an away trip to a tournament. It may be cutting his staff a little bit. In football, I think that could be we might begin to see that. Alford made the point, the pendulum has swung with revenue sharing. It used to be the coaches got all the money. If you had a surplus in your budget and a coach wanted a raise, or he was going to Texas A&M, you go, well, how much do we have to pay him to keep him? Right?
Right.
Those days are going to be gone now. I think you're going to see coaches' salaries, and a lot of sports won't be, they won't be going in the direction they have been. You'll start to see a tapering of what coaches are going to make because you've got a revenue share. Staff sizes, I think you'll see a reduction. Some coaches will say, I don't need all these people,
Right.
They're not going to want to cut their recruiting budgets any more than they have to. And then facilities. You saw what Ole Miss did. And this was something Andy Miller was preaching many years ago, is, think twice before you commit to build a building with a 30-year mortgage and with, $500,000 to $1 million in annual maintenance costs on it, and that's what Ole Miss did. They said they canceled all building projects, and they're putting the money into their NIL and into this. Florida State's too far down the line on the football operations building now. That ship has sailed. But I think you'll see, construction projects are probably going to slow in college athletics until they can absorb the cost of revenue sharing. So instead of the money going to the players and brick and mortar, to the coaches and brick and mortar, it's going to start swinging to the players, whether it be these additional scholarships or whether it be towards revenue sharing and NIL. Right? That's all you can do, beg, borrow, or steal. I don't know any other way. Now they can, with the new football ops building, that's an expense, right? The new football stadium project is a solution because you can generate more money in that facility than you could in the old facility. So you pay the bond issue with it, and it gives you a little surplus you can put towards this, as well as it gives you a facility that you can activate more than 7 days a year. And that's been a dream of mine to see the football stadium be activated more, which they do at stadiums across the country. But this stadium had some deficiencies that they've addressed in the renovation to where it'll be easier to have concerts and other events. So Alford expects to be able to generate revenue as a result of this renovation.
Yeah, I think those are some interesting storylines as you watch down the road to see how creative Florida State Athletics gets. As you've mentioned, the Champions Club designed to be a natural amphitheater, so acoustically there are some options there for bands. Hey, as we wrap up here on Wednesday, again, if you want more of those FSU Board of Trustees notes, go to the Osceola Village, floridastate.rivals.com. Check us out in the Osceola Village. If you're not a subscriber, jump in. It's a good time to get all of our notes on not just the football team, but recruiting and these business of college athletic stories. Let's just briefly talk Florida State football and Cal. I know we've done a lot of shows Monday, Tuesday. The guys will be back on Thursday. I'll set up the question this way because I think it might be an interesting discussion point for you and me and the people watching. If I can give you Darius Washington starting at left tackle, again, he was not able to go last week. Something happened in pregame warmups. That helps you a little bit on your offensive line, right? But if I give you Darius Washington back, you can have any one personnel change that you wish on offense. Now, obviously, a lot of people are going to be screaming for one in particular, but I'm curious. You can have one change. What would you do?
Well, I think I'd give him Barabbas. I mean, I think the fans are screaming for a change at quarterback, and I'm not in disagreement with them. I think DJ struggled. Well, I don't want to say DJ struggling. The whole offense is struggling, and often I don't think DJ's doing anything to help it. I think you need a spark there, and what I'm saying is that football's not rocket science, right? I mean and so that would be the one. Short answer.
I'm with you. I think if you stabilize the offensive line, and Darius could be a huge part of it, we could see Andre Otto in some capability. He's a guy that we think is really, really, if not close to ready, right? I think the Brock Glenn dynamic gives you an athletic quarterback, a guy who processes a little bit faster, clearly, than DJ, a guy who's holding on to the ball a little bit too long. I would go Brock Glenn. I would be curious what Andre Otto looks like as my distant number 2 request, obviously there. I don't know. I was talking about this with the guys on, maybe it was Monday night. I don't know if this offense can line up 2 tight ends, 12 personnel, and just say, we're going to out-physical you off the ball in the ground game. I would be curious what it looks like. Brock Glenn is your quarterback. You spread people out, 3 receivers. You try to run with just a very, not Jordan Travis type of look from prior years, but you've got that athletic runner, a guy who is going to look to pass if he has the capability to do so. Can it sustain some drives? Can it look better? Not saying it's going to win ball games, but it could look a lot better. That's my argument, I think, for Brock Glenn. I think we're both very curious if that does happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think what Brock gives you is partly it's that he's been in the system longer, but he processes the progressions quicker. He doesn't hold it as long. He's got a quicker internal clock to get out of there and run, and he's a quicker, more athletic quarterback in the traditional sense that I think can extend some plays. The other thing about this, and hope everybody that hears this believes me when I say this. I mean, DJ is a good person from what we can tell. His teammates seem to like him. There's not any, there's no reason to fire him over the relationship with the players. I mean, don't get me wrong on that point. I think he's good, solid guy. He's quiet. He's a quiet guy. And we've had very successful quarterbacks who are quiet. Charlie Ward. But Charlie was loud with the plays he made, you know, and he was inspirational with his actions. Because this offense isn't able to do much, DJ hasn't made plays that spark his teammates. You know, his actions haven't been able to speak. They've been muted by an offense that isn't having success. And that's a shame. I mean, I think if he'd have come out and that first drive we had, man, again, there in Dublin, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I remember seeing a drive like that with Jameis. Remember at Pittsburgh?
Yeah, 2013
wow.
opener.
I mean, they're going to fall in love with DJ if they keep doing this. But that didn't happen. And he's not the kind of guy that's going to shake his fist in the air and rally people. I don't think that's in his nature. I think it's a little more in Brock's nature. I think Brock's the kind of guy, I'm thinking about that run where DJ tried to hurdle the guy and he didn't make it and he stopped. He didn't have that second effort to get the first down. I think Brock gets that first down and I think he comes up shaking his fist and, you know, the players respond.
It's a rallying cry.
Yeah. And listen, I'm dreaming here. I'm making this stuff up, but you know, that's what my imagination tells me. Why? Because we see some of it, you know, you see a little of that. But again, let me just say, I mean, I said it today. I think for Brock to win this job, he's got to show his coaches and his teammates that he's clearly the answer. And I haven't seen that. You know, I see things he does better, but maybe he's a gamer. You know, maybe you need to get him in the game and see what he does and see how his teammates respond to him. And, you know, if it's not working, put DJ back in there. But, you know, now Kelly might chime in here because Kelly and I have had this conversation. You can't do that to a quarterback. You can't put him in for a series, and if it doesn't work out, yank him. You got to really give him the game. You got to commit to him. And whether that's at halftime or it's the whole week of preparation, is ideal so that, you know, he and his teammates can get in sync. Just throwing him out there is kind of, you're not giving yourself or him the best chance of success, I don't think. But anyway, we'll see. I don't think Mike is going to tell us on a Monday, though.
Right. I think a lot of people saw no depth chart changes and took that to be literally what it was going to look like moving forward. I think I'm not saying there could be some surprises. I don't think what Mike Norvell puts out on the depth chart on Monday, there's a direct line to what it's going to look like Saturday night at 7 p.m. against Cal. I'll be very curious to see what develops. And if something goes sideways early, do the coaches say, hey, let's give Brock a drive or two. Let's see what it looks like. There are a lot of questions. Again, this is a bridge quarterback that's not functioning through 3 games. The only way I feel you can develop a guy like Brock Glenn is to get him playing time in games. I'm arguing for him to play. I can definitely argue for him to start, but he needs on-field time, I think is where
Yeah.
A lot of us are, as far as what his development looks like.
Well, with Kelly's permission, let me say this. In talking to Kelly, you can develop. You don't have to be in a game to develop. If you're going up against a good defense at practice, you're getting better. And yes, once you get into a game, you can develop further. But Brock's a redshirt freshman,
right?
And so in most schools, he'd be still, going against, his own teammates every day at practice. So, and the other thing, Bob, I think, to be fair, if Mike were to decide to put Brock in there, it wouldn't be like this is the first time he's practiced with the ones. We see that every day at practice. I mean, he takes a series with the ones, he takes a series with the twos. Brock has had, plenty of reps with the ones. So I don't think it would be a shock to anybody to see him with the ones in a game. I mean, I think he's comfortable with them. They're comfortable with him. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
So.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to leave it there for our Wednesday show. Again, if you missed some of our early discussion about Ross Dellinger from Yahoo's story about this revenue restructuring, you can check us out back at the start of the episode. Watch it. Go back on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to listen to it. We'll put the links out there again to Ross's story. It's a must read if you're really curious and don't want to get too deep into the weeds of every movement. That's fine, but this is a pretty significant development there. But again, thanks for watching the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. For checking us out on Osceola YouTube, Facebook, Pat's Twitter, Kurt's Twitter. They'll be back Thursday, 3 p.m. Check us out. More of Florida State Cal. But for now, Jerry Kutz, I'm Bob Ferrante. Thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you soon.